Just as the U.S. media claimed Russia would attack Ukraine this week, Moscow said it doesn't want a war in Europe and has pulled back some troops. NATO called the announcement cause for cautious optimism, but U.S. President Joe Biden said the troop pullback is not verified yet. Will the announcement help de-escalate the crisis? Does that mean the U.S. will also scale back its soldiers from countries bordering Ukraine? And what is China's position on the issue? I'm pleased to be joined by political and defense analysts, including Professor Teng Jianqun, Director of the American Studies Department at the China Institute of International Studies in Beijing. We have Pavel Felgenhauer, that was the analyst from Russia, joining us from Moscow, and we have Professor Josef Mahoney of the East China Normal University joining us from Shanghai. Gentlemen, welcome to The Point. Professor Teng, let me go to you. U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, for instance, said Russia could launch military action or attempt to spark a military conflict inside Ukraine this week. And some media even called February the 16th D-Day. But now it seems that Moscow has announced a troop reduction in the border area. What exactly prompted Russia to pull troops back from the border?
Actually, this is a game played by relevant players in Europe. According to recent development, actually, Russia has already withdrawn some troops from the border areas very close to Ukraine. And I think the de-escalation of the situation in Ukraine is there. And the relevant players will continue such an effort to maintain the stability in Ukraine, but some other countries like the United States would like to continue such a game because this is a little bit tricky policy by Biden administration. If we look at the recent 1 year development in Ukraine, this is actually a result of the U.S. policy toward Europe and also toward Russia. So this is a game played by relevant players in Europe. We should be very close we should be very cautious to this development.
In Europe and North America, you mean. Let me go to Pavel, our guest in Moscow. How do you look at the situation? Do you agree that the threat raised about Russia was actually part of a result of a trick played by players in Europe and North America?
Well, it seems that the crisis that happened will be de-escalating. At least Russia has announced that it's beginning to stand down its forces, or the Russian military, not only close to Ukraine, but in the entirety of the country, were at a heightened state of readiness, sort of cocked and loaded to go. They couldn't stay in such a position indefinitely, and apparently now the process of standing down from heightened readiness has begun. It's provisional. There could be incidents that could reverse it, and this is not a swift process. It will take at least a month, most likely more, up to maybe April, to fully stand down the forces that were brought into different positions, like, say, Russia's biggest ship in the Far East, cruiser Varyag. It sailed before New Year, and now it's in the Mediterranean. For it to come back, it will take more than a month. Well, anyway, this is a stand down. This is good news, provisionally.
Do you think that Russia really wanted to invade Ukraine, Pavel?
Well, Russia says it didn't want to invade Ukraine, no way. But of course, that's intentions, and intentions can change in an hour, or at least in a fortnight. Capabilities were deployed, very serious. Russia showed that also to the United States, that Russia has deployed its forces. Now they'll be standing down, but the basic problems that caused this crisis have not been addressed at all. So that means that
what do you think?
This is
Pavel, what do you think is the basic problem?
Political solution.
Yeah, what do you think is the basic problems that are causing this crisis?
Well, Russia believes that this is its basic security is threatened by expansion of NATO and American forces to places close to its western border.
Okay.
including Ukraine, but not only, and that this should be reversed in an organized manner, and that there should be new security agreements that would regulate military and political security in Europe.
Yeah. Joseph, let me go to you. What does the Russian announcement say about partial troop standing down, about the Western allegation that an attack by Russia is imminent, was imminent at least?
Yeah, we are still getting some conflicting reports, but the thing that I have really focused on, although I haven't seen much detail yet in news reports, is that I think Kiev reached a point in its understanding that the U.S. was, perhaps even wanting Russia to invade, that this would create a tremendous problem for Russia down the line. There would be no clear exit strategy, and it would effectively discipline Europe and bring Europe back into the reach or the grasp of American hegemony, and that the U.S. was willing, in fact, to let Kiev burn and let Russia go down this dark path in order to achieve those broader strategic goals. And then, I think it was a day or so ago, we saw reports that Kiev was willing to offer concessions. And I don't know if that's what triggered Moscow's decision to pull back and to de-escalate, but I suspect that it's related.
Professor Teng, according to media reports on Tuesday, Russian President Putin met German Chancellor Olaf Scholz and said that Russia has been informed by Western powers that Ukraine would not join NATO in the near future. Please help us understand this, the sequence of seeing things. Do you think Russia is getting some genuine reassurance from the Western powers this time?
Yeah, this is actually achievement by the Putin administration after at least 2 months competition between Russia and the Western countries. This time, all the relevant players now returned to the negotiation table. We have witnessed the recent development. For example, a French president, a German president, and German chancellor also paid visit to Moscow. This is actually a very positive signal to the outside world that this time the European countries would like to play a very important role in maintaining the peace and the stability in Ukraine. And why the Russian leaders show such a great concern over the issue in Ukraine? This is actually a competition between Russia and NATO. I think Ukraine has been the last buffer zone for Russia to compete or to confront the challenges from NATO. So I think at this moment the issue or the tension in Ukraine will give very negative impact on the policy from Russia and from European countries. This time I think Russia and some European countries would like to return to the negotiating table and find a peaceful or stable solution to the issues in Ukraine.
Yeah. Pavel, what is your understanding of the sequence of things? I mean, what exactly do you think has ignited the current crisis, and was the threat by Russia real?
Well, the threat, of course, was real because with such a heightened state of readiness, there could be incident skirmishes in different parts of the world that could lead to a further uncontrollable escalation, like, say, the Russian frigate using live munitions, apparently to scare off an American submarine in the Sea of Okhotsk. Apparently no one got injured at all, but this was a dangerous development. And of course, speaking in Moscow at the press together with the German Chancellor, President Putin was very firm that assurances that Ukraine is not joining NATO anytime soon is not enough. That's absolutely not enough. That Russia wants more serious guarantees there, and that there are going to be negotiations, but these negotiations should produce results very soon. Or Russia, basically that means that this crisis may repeat itself in the foreseeable, maybe half a year, maybe, if nothing is achieved at the negotiating table.
Joseph, what is your reaction to Pavel's remarks? about how real the threat from Russia is and the kind of ongoing uncertainty that we may witness?
I think he's absolutely correct. I think the danger was absolutely there. I think it was imminent. And I think that it was not unreasonable for Moscow to push this at this time. The U.S. has been pushing NATO onto Russia's borders since the collapse of the Soviet Union. We've seen many other actions that have destabilized relations with Russia and tried to undermine relations between Russia and Europe, particularly related to energy, with serious effects or potential effects for Germany. So, this is something that has been brewing for some time, and we find the U.S. now in a position where for the past several years it's been letting its house burn down with polarization, with COVID, with a weak president. And so, this may be the opportunistic pushback from Russia, and it's quite sensible from a realistic international relations perspective for them to try to achieve these strategic goals at this time.
Finally, China has been dragged into the crisis basically right from President Putin attending the Beijing Olympic Games. The U.S. has accused China of tacitly supporting Russia, which is alarming and destabilizing to the security situation in Europe. China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs had this to say very quickly. Let's listen.
在当前的形势下
Under the current circumstances, exaggerating and hyping up the possibility of warfare is not responsible behavior. Resorting readily to sanctions and pressure won't help with de-escalating the situation. Clamoring for bloc confrontation will only lead to the old path of the Cold War. We call on all sides to adopt an equal and open attitude and work for the earnest implementation of the Minsk II agreement through dialogue and negotiation so as to create conditions for a political resolution of the Ukraine crisis.
Mr. Teng, how do you look at China's stance and the kind of accusation that by standing with Russia as, a close neighbor, good friend, that China is actually doing something alarming and destabilizing for European countries?
Yeah, this is not only a position for standing with Russia. It's also a policy by the Chinese government to maintain the peace and stability in Europe, especially to find a peaceful solution in Ukraine. According to such a position, of course, China will take a responsible policy at this time, including stand together with Russia and also with Ukraine for the sake of the people there. And some other countries, like the United States, only would like to manipulate the situation for its own sake, for example, to control European countries and to take a challengeable or confrontation with Russia. So this is actually a responsible policy from the Chinese government, and I'm sure in the future China will continue such support to maintain the peace and stability in Europe and to support the policies or measures taken by Russian Federation.
Okay, we're going to leave it there. Many thanks to our guest, Pavel Felgenhauer, joining us from Moscow, who joined us from Moscow, Teng Jianqun, Director of the American Studies Department at the China Institute of International Studies, and Professor Josef Mahoney from East China Normal University, joining us from Shanghai. With that, we come to the end of this edition of The Point with me, Liu Xin. As always, you can follow me on Facebook and Twitter using the handle Liu Xin in Beijing. Thanks for watching. You've got The Point.